Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm VA Winter. I am an indie author, and today we're talking about witchy urban fantasy books. So I am currently writing a series that is witchy urban fantasy, and this is kind of like my first love in stories. The first thing that I really got obsessed with was this genre. Urban fantasy is my thing, and I would love to find more books like these that I'm going to talk about. So if you have any recommendations, please leave them down below in the comments. And the first kind of book that I want to talk about is kind of more of a series, but it is the Women of the Otherworld series by Kelly Armstrong. This series covers all kind of supernatural creatures. The first two books in the series, which were obviously the introduction to the series, are about werewolves, which I really did enjoy. But the second two, Dime Storm Magic and Industrial Magic, follow witches. And these are my favourite books in the series. Though I do recommend the whole series, and I think there's a lot of value in reading the entire thing. But Dime Storm Magic follows a character called Paige Winterbourne, who lives a relatively normal life despite being a witch. And I think this was the first, at least one of the first books that I read about a witch or supernatural creatures really in a wider sense, that integrated them into the normal world like this in a kind of adult way. They were just living normal lives, not necessarily saving the world. They just sort of dealt with all of these issues that came along with being supernatural. There is magic in these books, and as I say, a supernatural kind of plot that goes along with it. But Paige also has normal worries and a normal life. All the books stand alone, but they weave together, as I say, in a kind of more organic way towards the end. Like you get crossovers with characters from other books, which I think is really clever and really fun, and I really love the idea of that. The next series slash book is, most of these are series, you will notice. First book in the series is Beautiful Demons by Sarah Cannon. The series is Shadow Demon Saga. This is an indie series. I've started it, but I haven't finished it. The story follows a girl called Harper, and she is a teenage girl in foster care and also a witch struggling to control her powers. The early ones are shorter. They move quickly, they're quite fast paced, but they follow that normal teenage life again, that old school urban fantasy vibe. Again, it's this idea of this, she's just a normal teenage girl, but she's a witch, and these sort of supernatural things are happening around her. But she also has to deal with boys and school and all those kind of other things as well. They aren't really urban fantasy in the sense that they take place in a city, which is often what we think of when we think of urban fantasy. They're kind of in a town that's a bit more rural, but it's the same kind of vibe. And as I say, they're YA. It's a real sort of coming of age story. The next one is another indie book, and that is Priestess Witch by Katerina Dennison. And this follows a character called Sylvan as she navigates high school life again in a small town. At the start of the story, she thinks she's the only sort of witch in her small community, but discovers that she's not. She forms a coven and gets drawn into a mystery of a ghost in the town. It is the first in the series. There is another one out that I haven't read yet, but I did really enjoy getting into this world. I'm always a little bit hesitant to recommend books that are in Kindle Unlimited, because unless you are in Kindle Unlimited yourself as a reader, or you buy your ebooks from Amazon, you can't get it anywhere else. If you are a KU reader, you can get it for free in air quotes. This book is really good. I just love the high school vibes of this. Again, the normal life colliding with this idea of being a witch and ghosts in this instance. I think that kind of makes this book feel a little bit different as well, because of the sort of seeing the dead element of it. The next one is one I do actually have a physical copy of, and that is Dead Witch Walking by Kim Harrison. This is a really old book, so this is the first book in a longer series following a character called Rachel Morgan. She is a witch and a bounty hunter in Cincinnati, America. She used to work for the official kind of organization that policed like the vampire, demon, supernatural world, but left due to kind of reasons that are explained as the books progress. And she now kind of works for hire, and there's some really fun conflict that history creates. I love Rachel as a character, and again, I haven't read all the books in this series. I sort of fell off reading it a few years ago and I never really picked back up with it. I do want to go back to it because it is really fun, and I think I'd appreciate it now in a way I didn't when I first read it. Rachel is quite witty, and the author obviously is as well. The writing style has a kind of humour to it. It's kind of like a sly humour. Again, it's this idea of another supernatural world being hidden in our world, which is the thing I think I really enjoy about urban fantasy. It's the idea that in the shadows of our world, that this world of magic where anything could happen, and anything and everything does happen in these books. And then the last one is Bad Witch Burning, almost the last one. The last actual recommendation is Bad Witch Burning by Jessica Lewis. This follows a character called Cottrell, who is a witch and she can speak with the dead, summon the dead. She's got a really difficult home life, and this is what drew me to this book. She tries to use her magic to improve her life financially, which I think is a really interesting take on fantasy, I suppose. It does lead her into some trouble, and it's really a story about the consequences of magic and also the difficulties that come with not having any money, not having supportive parents, trying to survive in a world that doesn't really want to seem to help. Again, exactly the kind of book that I really enjoy. Underdog characters, witchy vibes, and difficult choices. So, on to some honourable mentions, because I can't do this video without mentioning my 3 biggest inspirations and kind of what hooked me into this witchy / urban fantasy world. First, Buffy. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, or was, a TV show turned into a comic book series, and looks as though it's now going to be sort of rebooted and there's going to be like a sequel series I'm quite excited about. But I love this idea of this petite blonde girl being the thing that monsters are afraid of. I love the way the show was written. It was really cleverly written. Obviously there's been issues come out about the person who created it in recent years, unfortunately. Again, that combination of normal teenage struggles with action, the world of the supernatural, sort of using the world of the supernatural in so many ways as metaphors for the various difficult things that we go through in growing up and becoming an adult, in dealing with life. That's kind of the crux of what I love about urban fantasy. And this show was one of my first experiences of the genre, and I absolutely loved it. I still love it. And Charmed, which was also a TV show that was out about the same time, was similar, but with witches. I loved the relationships between the sisters. It followed 3 sisters who discovered they were witches and they came back together. They'd been estranged and they came back together to live in this house that was owned by their grandmother who'd just died. That kind of world really unfolded really steadily and expanded a lot over the course of the series. I think there was like 7 seasons in the end. It is more of an adult show than YA. Buffy was definitely YA that sort of then branched into kind of being more adult as Buffy herself got older and grew up. And that was another thing I really loved about these sorts of shows and books like Shadow Demon Saga. They're following these characters as they grow up and become adults. You see a longer view of a character, a longer view of a story. But Charmed was kind of like Friends but with magic, and you saw the ups and downs of their relationships, their work lives, trying to figure it out. It was kind of like new adult, really. And finally, the last little thing that I will talk about is a series of books called The Night World by L.J. Smith. L.J. Smith, I think, is better known for The Vampire Diaries. I never really read that, watched that, got into that. But Night World was probably the first books that I read that were fantasy. I read these so long ago that which is why I didn't put them in my main recommendations list, because I'm not 100% sure they've stood the test of time, because I read them that long ago that I really barely remember. The only story I remember of them is a story about a girl called Poppy who got diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she knew this boy called, I think his name was James, who turned her into a vampire to save her life. That's really the only thing I remember, but I know there was a series of longer books and I read them several times, but I borrowed them from the library. So I've never owned physical copies of them. I potentially do need to reread at some point, just for the nostalgia of it. I was completely transfixed by those stories. They were proper urban fantasy, and YA urban fantasy. A world of magic combined with sort of romance. They each followed a different character from what I remember. There was a different relationship in each book, but they all had this connection to this underworld of magic. That's really what I loved. So that's it, really. As I said at the beginning, let me know what you might add to that list, or any recommendations you have. Do you remember any of the things that I've talked about? Do you remember Night World? Do you ever read Night World? And if you did like the vibes of these stories, check out my debut novel, Fire Witch, which is linked down below. I think it'll still be on pre-order by the time this video goes live. I don't think it'll be far off release, but the links, etc. are all down below for that, along with other sort of things that I do and offer and all the rest of it. And other than that, I will say, if you liked this video, hit like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and I will see you next time with another video.